Live.
All right, it appears that we are live on Facebook for folks far and wide to watch the machinations of Troy City government work this evening. This is the Committee of the Whole. My name is William Lutz. I'm President of Council. We have all council members here, it appears. Mr. Schweizer must be indisposed at the moment. Mr. Seaver. The only item for the Committee of the Whole is to provide a recommendation to council, begin to hold meetings at the Bravo Room with the August 3rd meeting. I have talked with many of you, if not a majority of you, and a question that I keep on getting is, when can we meet in person again? It appears from the conversations I've had, there is a desire to get off of the Zoom platform and begin to have traditional public meetings, especially when it looks like in the near future, we're going to have items of a large public interest that probably will have some degree of public input that we want to have as part of our discussions. Our code of ordinances does not allow anybody to change the location of council meetings. And that is important because from the conversations I've had with Mr. Titterington, we are limited to 20 individuals within council chambers. So by the time that you add council members, staff members, other elected officials, you've maxed out at 20 pretty quick. And that doesn't allow the public to be there. And let's be honest, council chambers is not conducive to social distancing in any real way that allows good discussions to happen. So one of the things that we're looking to do is to amend the one section of our code of ordinances that would give myself the authority to change the locations of those meetings as long as there is due public notice, and that we would begin this with the August 3rd meeting. I would be happy to entertain any staff input if you have any. Did I explain it well enough?
You most certainly did. One question that's out there is Zoom.
Correct. Mr. Phillips, go ahead.
So is it just a simple language change in the ordinance that we're looking at this moment?
Correct. Basically, the request that I've made is that as long as there is an emergency as proclaimed by the mayor, the president of council has the opportunity to change locations of the meetings.
Got it. Thank you.
You're welcome. One thing that we do have to keep in mind is that when we go back to live meetings, we will no longer do Zoom meetings. The Human Relations Commission met last Wednesday, and if you listened to that meeting, it was very difficult to understand anything that happened in that meeting just due to acoustics and AV capabilities of that room. However, there should be plenty of room in which folks who want to participate will have the opportunity to do so. My personal feeling on committee meetings is if those want to return to Zoom, that's okay with me. But if we want to use council chambers for committee meetings, we can certainly use that. Very rarely are there more than 20 members in council chambers for a committee meeting.
Then, Mr. President, I'll make that motion outlining the language that you used with as to the emergency situation as it applies to the mayor and that sort of thing for the city of Troy.
Okay.
Second.
All right. Well, we do have we have a motion to approve the new language by Mr. Phillips and seconded by Mr. Rozelle. Before I ask for a roll call vote or anything, I do want to get. I don't even think it'll be a roll call. We don't need to do a roll call. I will ask if any council members have any comments or questions on what's being proposed. I'm seeing a lot of head shake left and right, so I think we're cool with it. So we'll just do a basic voice vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? The recommendation carries. We will have this on the July
August
or the
August 3rd.
no, but we'll vote on it next meeting,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Yeah, we'll vote on it.
Sure.
We'll vote on the ordinance the next meeting.
Sorry.
So that will end tonight's committee of the whole meeting. We will now move to the Buildings and Utilities Committee with Mr. Allen, Mr. Terwilliger, and Mr. Twist, and I will happily hand the baton off to Mr. Allen.
Thank you, President Lutz. It is Monday, July 13th, 2020 at 6:13. This is a meeting of the Buildings and Utilities Committee. I'm Zachary Allen, Chair of the committee, and we also have Mr. Twist and Mr. Terwilliger on the Zoom call as well. We have two items on the agenda. The first subject is to discuss authorizing professional services agreement for the Kidder Ditch Drainage Study and Improvements Project. It is a recommendation that council authorizes the Director of Public Service and Safety to enter into professional services agreement with Strand Associates of Cincinnati, Ohio, for a scope of services to include a hydraulic study of the Kidder Ditch, design and bidding assistance for the Kidder Ditch Improvement Project, and assisting in developing policies and preparing educational materials regarding responsibilities of the ditch maintenance at a total cost not to exceed $379,900. Mr. Titterington?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You basically read the recommendation from the report, so I won't repeat myself, which I've been accused of doing. I will say that in the 2020 original budget, we had $600,000 budgeted. That was a carryover of $300,000 from last year to this year, just because of timing. We had $300,000 in the stormwater fund and $300,000 in the capital improvement fund. With the estimated revenue impacts to the general fund, which is seeded, if you will, or is money spent and transferred to, I guess, the capital improvement fund. We originally, as part of our austerity measures, have frozen the $300,000. So we still have the $300,000 available in the stormwater improvement fund. The $600,000 was to do an RFP, do as much of the work as we possibly could as far as designing and possibly phasing construction improvements to the Kidder Ditch without having a detailed analysis of the entire ditch, without doing a modeling of the stormwater flows with the intakes, especially. It's difficult to make any kind of forecast as to what final capital expenditures will be. So what the engineering department did was they submitted an advertised for a request for qualifications to a number of professional engineering firms. Those firms responded to our request to provide that modeling, to provide the design work, and then as part of that, as a proactive approach while we look at how we phase in capital improvements, also doing the educational pieces, because we do notice that there are those folks along the ditch line that have put temporary or permanent obstructions in the ditch, use that ditch as an extension of their backyard, particularly when it comes to composting and other activities, and education is really something that we need to do as soon as possible. I have talked to the auditor, Mr. Frigge, about using more than just the $300,000. He is comfortable at this time in unfreezing, if you will. I mean, those are internal controls that we're doing. So It doesn't take an act of Congress to do this. But using an additional $80,000, if you will authorize the $380,000 to let us do this, we will proceed.
Thank you. I don't have any questions, Mr. Twist. Mr. Twilliger, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I just have one, just to clarify, this is actually just for them to come up with what the improvement project is. It's not actually for the cleaning out of the ditch at this time. It's more of what are the best areas to improve and how we can improve those, but not actual cleaning of the ditch, correct? Or building of those projects.
That's correct. Timing wise, as well as the fiscal issues, but timing works that it will take several months to do just
Right.
modeling and then the design work. And then if we can create the educational materials and get those out at the beginning of the year, then people can anticipate the spring season and what not to do in the ditch while we look at the capital plan.
Okay.
So no earth gets moved till next spring at the earliest.
That'd be what we anticipate unless we had a mild winter.
Okay.
Does anybody else on council have any other questions or comments? Hearing none, I'm ready to make a recommendation in favor of, gentlemen.
Yes, move forward.
Yes.
All right, we'll move forward on that one. Item 2 on our agenda is amendment and extension, generation and transmission supply agreement for city accounts. Mr. Titterington.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the city of Troy has been part of a cooperative, if you will, with 19 or 20 other communities, all part of the Miami Valley Communications Council, where we have cooperatively purchased our electric service for our city facilities. It's one that has been very successful for us for the past several years. Prior to the recent shutdown and the economic upheaval, if you will, the consultant that MVCC has used was recommending that we go out to bid to try to get better prices. Our prices are extremely competitive right now, but under normal circumstances, the forecasts were for those prices on the open market to go up. And so rebidding to gain more competitive edge was advised. However, with the past few months, the market has changed substantially. Our consultant is telling us that we are better off locking into an extension of our current contract. Again, that is, it requires unanimous support of all of the communities. Just received the request today from the MVCC executive director. Time is of the essence, and so we wanted to get it to you today. I can tell you that the estimate, if we extend the contract until May of 2024, is a savings of approximately $134,000 over the next several years by locking in at a discounted rate now and continuing to extend the current contract. For that reason, we are requesting that you consider emergency legislation so that we can all get on board and get this extended as quickly as possible.
Thank you. I have no questions. Do any other committee members have questions?
Nope.
No.
Are we ready to vote? I vote in favor. Mr. Twist, Mr.
Yeah,
Twilliger?
move forward, move forward.
All right.
Move forward with emergency.
Thank you.
Do we need anything else, Mr. Titterington?
No, sir.
Okay, that concludes Buildings and Utilities Committee.
Mrs. Snee, you're up next with the Community and Economic Development Committee.
Thank you, Mr. President. It is July 13th, approximately 6:22 in the evening, and this is a meeting of the Community and Economic Development Committee with Mr. Rozell and Mr. Twist also on the Zoom call. We are considering providing a recommendation to council regarding ordinance number 034-2020, which is the proposed rezoning of the parcel with the address 1375 South Union from county zoning I2 to city zoning M3 General Industrial District. Mr. Titterington, any further information?
Only that the planning commission unanimously approved this, and there was a public hearing at the last city council meeting.
Okay. Are there any questions from the committee members?
Move
Okay,
forward.
then I would propose that we
Forward.
forward. Mr. Twist and
Yes.
Rozell?
Yes.
It's unanimous. Forward then.
Okay, very good.
Okay. And if there's no further business, this committee is adjourned.
Mr. Schilling, you're up next with the Recreation and Parks Committee.
Okay, it is Monday, July 13th at 6:23, and this is a meeting of the Recreation and Parks Committee. Let me get up here to where we're supposed to be. Okay. Okay, it is the first item before us is the Waco Park declaring a surplus. The council, the recommendation is that the council accept the recommendation of the Board of Park Commissioners and declare Waco Park as surplus and authorize the sale of the land. Is there somebody from the parks or Mr. Kitterington? Are you going to field the questions on that?
I certainly can.
Okay. Are there any questions from the committee, Mr. Phillips, Mr. Twilliger? Mr. Phillips, go ahead.
Thank you, sir. Excuse me. Mr. Titterington, as to the question of the use of the park, how do we know that that it gets little used? And is there any verification? Do they have cameras out there monitoring anything? Are there any shelters out there that get reserved and that sort of thing? Or
So the park department staff is out there quite a bit because it is one of the parks that they maintain. I'm not aware of any shelters that are reserved. There is some playground equipment out there. It's in good enough shape. It's not in great shape, but this is something that the park superintendent has been concerned that it does get very, very little use. And so if you'll recall, they did come forward to the council during the Archer Park discussion. We asked that they take it back and the park board reevaluate it under the guidelines. And they in fact did that. If you look at my report, I mean, they went through it line by line. And they reiterated the fact that this is surplus and it's truly not used.
Mr. Twilliger, do you have any questions you'd like to ask?
No, I do not.
Okay, I have a couple. In looking at the background information, again, the reason were that the park property was for sale. The park is little used. There's no off-street parking. And of course, the Board of Park Commissioners is in charge of the maintenance of the park, which they are in charge of the maintenance of most of our parks. So again, it's right now it's parkland. I had a chance to visit out there, Waco Park. This appears to be just a neighborhood park. There's no baseball or other specific athletic fields. There are a couple of pieces of playground equipment, but nothing out of the ordinary. There are no shelters or other structures to attract visitors to the park. So there's really, as a neighborhood park, there's really no need to have any off-street parking because the neighborhood is close enough that most people could walk or use some other type of transportation like bicycles or whatever. Again, the only visitors to the park would be neighborhood children, parents, relatives, or guardians of the children. I count about 70 homes in the neighborhood other than, and my question is that other than the Board of Park Commissioners meetings and the meetings of this committee, have the neighborhood and residents been notified of the Board of Park Commissioners request to this committee to sell the property as surplus, Mr. Titterington?
No, there's no process to communicate with them separate from the, the open meetings that we have and that the park board has.
Okay. Are there any other parks nearby? In other words, if this park disappears, where are the neighborhood children going to go to play if they want to go play to a park? Can they, is there a park nearby they could go? Is there another subdivision that has a park that they could go to? Or is this, are we creating a park desert by selling this piece of property? Mr. Titterington.
Yeah, we're
Haywood would be the closest. Haywood would be your closest,
Haywood, okay.
would be your closest park to them.
Okay. Is that Haywood Park accessible by walking or riding a bike? Is there we have a sidewalk network system that goes from this subdivision out to Haywood Park?
Well, so when you talk about bikes, they're not supposed to be on the sidewalk when they're riding their bikes.
Only in the downtown.
No, that's community wide. There are some allowances when you're young kids, but other than that, no. But I mean, there's paved roads to be able to do that. As far as sidewalks, I'm not aware of any gaps, but I would have to look at the map.
This is only a city owned by the city because it backs into the former Goodrich now, God, I can't think of it.
Well, United
Business.
Technologies, but they sold it again. Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't matter who it is, but it's only in the city limits because it's attached to that. Everything else around it is township and county. So there's no sidewalks and curbs and gutters out there.
Behind it, yeah, correct.
How many other parks in neighborhoods throughout Troy could be classified in the same manner? In other words, the little used parks in neighborhoods.
Well, the board does do an evaluation every year. And so they basically answer that question every year. This is the only one that they've recommended to us in the past several years as surplus. So they're very sensitive to that. They don't routinely give us recommendations declaring properties surplus. This may be, they've talked about it.
They've
For
talked about
several
it for
years.
a few years and
Okay.
The last that the park declared surplus in this general area was at Peters and Peters, that now has 3 homes sitting on it,
Right.
about 3 or 4 years ago.
After the sale, if there is a sale, again, we can put it up for sale, nobody buys it, but let's assume that somebody may buy it. What zoning classification would be assigned to that property?
It's already assigned.
Residential.
We're looking that up,
Mm.
but not quickly.
Sorry, okay, it's got to load.
So it would not be basically, I mean, it's not going to be would it be, I guess the surrounding properties are residential, then the likelihood it would remain a residential zoning on that property.
It's zoned R5, so yes, it is residential.
Okay. And my understanding is that no developer has been in contact with the Board of Park Commissioners concerning this property.
We're not aware of anybody.
Okay. And the property totals 1.37 acres, the 2 lots together. From the map, it appears as that 2 or possibly 3 residential lots to be carved out of the park property. Or could it be under R5, could it be used as used to construct a multi-story apartment complex?
No, that's all single family.
Pardon?
That's all single family.
All single family.
Yep.
Okay.
It's the
Um,
highest, it is the highest density, single-family zoning district we have.
Okay. And then again, because we haven't had any input, I mean, obviously we have nobody tonight talking to us. And I don't believe anybody has questioned the Board of Park Commissioners. Would it be appropriate, I'm asking the members of the committee, would you think it'd be appropriate to have a public hearing on this request? Considering it is, we're essentially removing a park from a neighborhood. To see what the neighborhood says about it.
Not city.
I wouldn't be in favor of that.
Nor would I.
Okay.
Mr. Schilling, it's really not I mean, it's a neighborhood park, but the neighborhood is actually in the township, not in the city. I mean, we could notify the township and see if they want to buy it for the township residents, but you know, it's surrounded by the city property that's surrounded by is Collins, the area around Collins.
Well, I was out in the neighborhood. I mean, it is a, you're right. I guess I was not aware it wasn't in the city of Troy, but again, it's, again, these are just questions I have on this. Okay. So is there any other questions that anybody else has on concerning this?
Done here.
Okay.
Well, to
Okay,
clarify,
so what's our preference here? Do we want to move forward with this?
So moved.
I'm willing to move forward on it.
Okay, I think we can do that. We can move forward with that. Okay. Recommend to go ahead and authorize it for sale. Okay, the next one, we're declaring another park land surplus. That's 4 in the last time. Anyway. Okay, the council the recommendation is for the council to accept the recommendation of the Park Board Commissioners and declare surplus a small parcel of Archer Park. Wow, we've been there before. To the rear of 700 Governors Road and authorize the sale of the land. Are there any questions from the committee?
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Go ahead.
It's not a question, but it's just a statement. And this is just a continuation of the cleaning up of that corner of Archer Park that has the various encroachments there. And I would expect possibly there may be a couple of more of these coming forward in the next year or two, depending on the conduct of the neighborhood out there. But I think at the moment, this might clean up the last one that has actively got an encroachment.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Turner, I forgot to ask, did you have anything else you wanted to add to this?
Just to note that again, the park board did use the new policy. This was one that was requested by the property owner that was out there and not initiated by the park board. It was one that we were sitting on while we went through the policy creation and adoption. It does involve an encroachment. It was not an encroachment that was created by the requesting property owner. It was built prior to the current property owner owning the property. The park board has been, we've talked to the park board about, to Mr. Phillips's point, squaring that off. There is not unanimity amongst those property owners to whether or not they want that, and that's why we're not pushing that at this time. Whether with property owners changing or the current property owner attitudes changing, we're not anticipating any more requests anytime soon, knock on wood.
Okay. And while we're on that subject, I know we talked a couple of weeks ago about property owners that have an encroachment in the parkland can contact the city and essentially work out an agreement where we're not going to essentially require them to move their encroachment off park property right now, but we reserve that in the future. And I saw that we sent out, or we will be sending out approximately 20 letters to property owners that have encroachments into our parklands. And the letter, at least what I got from the park board was, if you don't move this, if you don't move this encroachment, we will, which is a little bit different than what we had talked about a couple of weeks ago. And I'm assuming here that we are just staking out a position that option of still having the property owner contact the city and say, hey, we got an encroachment, can we work this thing out without having to move it, is still available. Am I right about that, or has this policy changed a little bit?
So to bring council up to speed, the staff made a presentation at the last park board meeting. The staff, including our management analyst, our intern, and our city surveyor, went and toured every park after looking at the aerials, and found 11 minus this 700, so 10 ongoing encroachments by property owners. The park board requested, recognizing that 9 out of the 10 are city property and 1 is actually park board property. But again, following the policy, it goes from them to the council for affirmation. The park board asked that we send a letter notifying the 10 property owners that there is an encroachment. We will include the aerial with the boundaries and the identifying the encroachment to them. And the first letter that we send to them will say, or is going to say, that you have an encroachment, you may be required to remove it. Please contact us so we can talk about the exact nature of the encroachment, and how we can get it moved if it's required to do so. So the park board wanted to do a 2-step process where we will initially inform the property owner that there is an encroachment, figuring that maybe many, if not all of them, didn't even know they had an encroachment. And then they will be following up with our esteemed development director, who may show shock, but knows full well that his name and phone number is at the bottom of the letter, to discuss what kind of encroachment it is, because each encroachment to become legal may be held to a different standard. For example, sheds need to be 5 feet off the property line. Fences, and we have several of both that are encroaching. Fences can either be on the property line or offset, depending on the circumstances. And so knowing that each case may be a little different, the park board wanted to take a 2-step approach and get contact with each property owner to see what they'd like to do and what kind of time they would need to do it.
Great. So it's conceivable that you said 10. I thought I counted more than that. Anyway, we'll say 10. These 10 people that have encroachments, then could approach the park board and again request a sale of surplus property. Is that true?
They could initiate that process if they wanted to, yes.
So it's possible we're going to be selling another 10 parcels of property here soon.
Maximum, sure.
Okay.
Mr.
Questions, John?
With 700 Governor Drive, the property that we initially requested or discussed, the person who is obtaining this triangular piece of property, the city of Troy will benefit from the sale of this because this property will be maintained far and above what the city and park board has been able to do. And because of that, I'd like to recommend that we accept this offer.
Again, that was my next question to our committee. If there's no more questions, then do we want to move forward with this recommendation?
Yes.
Please.
Okay, we're in agreement on that. We'll move forward on it. And we'll hang our for sales shingle and see what happens. I think that is all we are going to talk about today. So I think unless there's anything else, Mr. Kitterington?
No, sir.
Okay, I think we're done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Finally, with Mr. Phillips and Streets and Sidewalks.
Thank you, Mr. President. Today is continuing to be July 13th at 6:42 p.m. and this is the Streets and Sidewalks Committee. And Mrs. Snee and Mr. Schilling are on the Zoom meeting app. And we are here to discuss the ODOT consent or some preliminary legislation for culvert work under I-75 with corporate boundary. Mr. Titterington, are you giving the staff report?
I certainly can. This is a request that we received late last week. It is some repairs that they want to make to a culvert. It's actually in the area behind Staples. It is on in the highway right-of-way area, but since it is within the corporate limits of Troy, they require our permission. There will be no cost to us, no responsibilities, no liabilities, nothing like that. They, as always, request that we approve this as emergency legislation if that's acceptable to you all, and so we recommend that as well.
I have no questions. Mrs. Snee, do you have any?
I do not.
Okay, and Mr. Schilling, your
No, I don't.
motion.
No
Thank you.
No questions here.
Due to the lag, I thought the shaking of the head was your comment there, Mrs. Snee. Mr. Schilling has no questions either. Any other council
No.
people have any questions about this matter? Committee members, what is your pleasure?
I think we should move forward.
Move forward.
All right, then it's unanimous with the committee to move forward with emergency on this legislation. Any other items to come before the Streets and Sidewalks Committee?
No,
No.
Somebody need to wake up the staff in there or something?
sorry.
All
We're
right,
not.
great. Then we are adjourned. Thank you very much for attending.
Thank you.
We're done.